Welcome to NarrativeNook audio tales where enchanted stories come to life. If you enjoy our stories, please subscribe, like and share to support our channel. Enjoy listening.
After hearing it, Courtney swayed and almost passed out from anger. Queenie was anxious too. She was sure Bonnie had wronged Courtney, but her parents didn't know. "Bonnie, the jewelry was given to me by Leslie. Even if one box is lost, that's something I should worry about. I'm sure Mrs. Lohman didn't do it. Let me resolve this matter, don't you intervene." "Mom, did you hear what she just said?" "I was trying to help her. However, she thinks I'm meddling." Bonnie pouted with her red lips as she showed an affronted expression. "I'm a Silverstein too, why can't I take care of the affairs of the family? Am I always an outsider in Queenie's eyes?" Maggie was in a difficult position. At this moment, a clear and charming male voice rang from the hall. "Queenie, I found the jewelry you lost. Take a look." Everyone turned around, and Maggie was taken aback. "Why is Nigel here?" On the other hand, Bonnie looked in disbelief at the 4 jewelry boxes in Nigel's hand. "No way, why are there 4 boxes? I took one of them." Queenie immediately understood the situation. She remembered Ashley had sent a box earlier, which meant Nigel was giving her a solution to the problem at hand in a good way. "Yes, these are the 4 boxes of jewelry that Leslie gave me. All of them are found." "Thank you, Nigel." Queenie looked up at him gratefully and changed the way she addressed him. Maggie couldn't help but let out a sigh of relief and apologized to Courtney. "I'm sorry, Courtney. Bonnie has wronged you." Courtney cried tears of joy as she watched all 4 boxes of jewels, which meant her suspicions were cleared up. At that, she looked at the handsome Manson. "Thank you, young Master Nigel. You are kind." After the initial shock, Bonnie finally realized that Nigel had deliberately bought another jewelry box to help Queenie. With the 4 boxes found, the matter would be concluded. On the other hand, she got a charge of defamation. Moreover, Queenie seized the opportunity to teach Bonnie a lesson. "Bonnie, apologize to Mrs. Lohman." Queenie fixed her gaze on Bonnie. I did wrong her, but there's no need to apologize." Bonnie had an aggrieved look on her face. "I saw only 3 boxes on the couch last night." "You wronged Mrs. Lohman, but you don't even want to give her an apology? Is that fair to her? Even if Dad and Mom dote on you, you must apologize." Queenie didn't budge. "You." "Mom, Bonnie hurriedly asked Maggie for help. She couldn't apologize to a lowly servant. At this time, Brandon also came over as the police had already left. He heard what happened over here in the garden earlier. Firstly, he greeted Nigel politely. "Nice to meet you, President Manson." "Hello, Mr. Nigel," answered with a smile. "Bonnie, I've heard everything. Queenie is right, you should apologize." Brandon took on a serious face. In front of Nigel, he had to put on a show as a proper father. Although Bonnie was reluctant, she still apologized as Nigel was there. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Lohman. I've wronged you." Bonnie also hated Queenie. It was Queenie's fault that caused her to do this. Queenie must have deliberately made Nigel buy a box of jewelry. "I did not expect that, but I can now own the jewelry, as Queenie wouldn't pursue it any further." However, Courtney looked away as she didn't want to accept such an insincere apology from Bonnie. "Courtney, the Silverstein family should apologize to you regarding this matter. Bonnie has wronged you, and we're sorry," Maggie said tenderly. Then, Courtney finally nodded and said, "I can leave this matter alone, but I don't want to work here anymore. After this incident, I'm afraid that Miss Bonnie will still wrong me. Mrs. Lohman, please don't leave us. I'm used to your cooking, so please stay." Queenie said with reluctance. "Miss Queenie, I too have enjoyed working in this family. However, I must go now." No, I can never taste your shrimp chowder or spaghetti anymore. Queenie's eyes turned red as she didn't want Courtney to leave. Miss Queenie. I will miss you too, Courtney said as her eyes turned red. At this moment, Nigel spoke to Courtney. Mrs. Lohman, I have a proposal. My house is short of someone to help with housekeeping. Why don't you work with me? In this way, Queenie can have your cooking again. When Courtney heard that, she looked at Nigel with surprise. Really? I can work at your house? Queenie was also happy that Nigel gave Courtney a job, so she hurriedly persuaded, Mrs. Lohman, just say yes. Yes. I will work for you with all my heart, Courtney responded with tears of joy. The Silverstein couple was happy for her too. In this way, Courtney had another job without a long search. There was only one that was unhappy with the outcome, and that was Bonnie. Everything Nigel did today was for Queenie, even the maid accepted the offer to work at his house. Thank you, Mr. Nigel. I'm sorry to make you watch this incident. Let's drink some tea in the hall, Brandon said. Then, Nigel turned to follow Brandon to drink tea. On the other hand, Maggie was comforting Courtney. Bonnie's gaze was fiercely fixed on Queenie. Then, Bonnie walked to Queenie's side and said through clenched teeth, Well done, Queenie. Immediately, Queenie reached out to Bonnie. Give me back that jewel. Bonnie rolled her eyes. I don't have it. Queenie, too, was not in a hurry. She would find where the jewelry went and wouldn't let Bonnie have it. After drinking tea for a while, Queenie said to her father, Dad, I want to tell Nigel something. Afterward, she commented to Nigel, Come to my room. So, Nigel got up and followed her upstairs. Bonnie stared at them with jealousy as she felt that Queenie deliberately acted that way for her. Bonnie, you are grounded. Think about your actions today. Do not talk nonsense if you don't have evidence to back it up, Brandon told Bonnie. Bonnie had lost some affection in her parents' eyes after this incident, which deepened her hatred toward Queenie. When Queenie entered the room and saw the box, she curiously came over and took a look. Then, she widened her beautiful eyes. Why did you buy so many? I won't allow my woman to go without jewelry to match her clothes. Nigel closed the door and curled his lips into a smile. From now on, just tell me what you want. At that, Queenie turned around and did one thing she had always wanted to do. She got up and lunged toward Nigel to wrap her arms around his neck as she kissed him on his cheek. Thank you. You've helped me a lot today, Queenie stated gratefully. Just a kiss? The man felt that wasn't enough repayment and that he needed at least a few more kisses. However, Queenie got a little shy, so she buried herself in his arms and murmured, I'll repay you later. I'm embarrassed to do so in my house. When Nigel heard that, he leaned down and stamped her lips. Okay, you must make up next time. On the other side, Bonnie returned to her room, and her face turned pale with anger. Courtney's incident had ended, and she was now defamed in front of Nigel. Not even her parents were on her side. It was the first time she had felt frustrated since she came home. Bonnie was reluctant, especially after seeing Nigel's love for Queenie. It made her foresee Queenie becoming Mrs. Manson. If Queenie becomes Mrs. Manson, I can't act freely in this house anymore. No, I must not let Queenie marry Nigel. Queenie did not let Nigel stay in her room for too long as she was afraid her parents would misunderstand, so they went downstairs after chatting in the room for a while. Nigel was also going to a meeting over at the hotel. However, Maggie spoke to him enthusiastically. Nigel, have lunch before you leave. Mom, he has an urgent meeting. Queenie said. You have to eat lunch even if there's an urgent meeting. How about we eat at a restaurant? Brandon wanted to know more about the future son-in-law. Mom, sure, Mr. and Mrs. Silverstein. Let's all go out for a meal. It's my treat, Nigel stated with a smile. She wanted the couple to know more about him so that they would feel safe in his pursuit of their daughter. No, I can't let you do that. Let us treat you. Maggie laughed, feeling utterly happy. No, I insist. Nigel wanted to please the couple from the bottom of his heart. Ultimately, they didn't fight over the bill and let Nigel treat them. Maggie went upstairs and knocked on Bonnie's door. Bonnie, we're going out for lunch. Then, the door opened. Bonnie appeared with a sad expression and she admitted her mistake. Mom, I'm not in the mood for lunch. I blame myself every time I think of wronging Mrs. Lohman. I am really sorry to her. Bonnie couldn't bow down to Courtney and apologize to her, but she could do anything in front of her mother if it meant playing up her good daughter persona. Seeing Bonnie admitting her mistakes, Maggie couldn't help but comfort her. That's enough. When people make mistakes, as long as they can recognize the mistakes and correct them, it's all right. Mom, I'm not going. Bonnie wouldn't let Queenie continue to mock her at the table. Okay. We will be back soon after Nigel treats us to lunch, Maggie said. Bonnie was startled for a moment before she hurriedly asked, Mom, what did you say? Who is treating us to lunch? It's Nigel. What's the matter? Maggie was surprised at Bonnie's reaction. Mom, I'm hungry right now. I'll go with you. I'll be starving by the time you come back. Bonnie immediately covered her stomach and said, I didn't eat anything this morning either. Then, why did you say you're not going? I'm going. Please wait for me, I'll go down right away. After speaking, Bonnie closed the door and rushed to the wardrobe to pick the dress she was most satisfied with. Then, she hurriedly changed into it and went to the mirror to fix her makeup. There was no reason for her not to go to a lunch that Nigel treated. Not only was she going to go, but she was also going to put on beautiful makeup and dress up. Downstairs, Queenie got impatient waiting and turned toward her parents. Mom, Dad, why don't you guys accompany Bonnie to lunch? I'll eat with Nigel. Based on Queenie's understanding of Bonnie, she didn't show up for so long because she was elaborately dressing up to act in front of Nigel. Geez, what's the matter with Bonnie? Didn't she say she'll come down in a while? It's been more than 10 minutes. Maggie also felt helpless. Finally, Bonnie came as everyone was waiting for her. She was in good spirits now instead of being listless after the criticism she had just received. I'm so sorry to keep you guys waiting. Seeing that everyone was waiting for her, Bonnie immediately apologized in a delicate voice. It's all right. Let's go. Later Nigel has a meeting, Brandon said, and Bonnie immediately looked at Nigel. I'm sorry, Nigel. As Bonnie had stopped addressing Nigel as a young master, Queenie was not happy. Why is she doing that? Queenie got into Nigel's sports car while Bonnie could only ride in her father's car, which caused Bonnie to surge with wild jealousy. Nigel's sports car was very racy, and she wanted to ride in it too. They arrived at a fancy restaurant. Then, they went upstairs and entered a private room, which Nigel had booked in advance. After sitting down, it was time to order. When Queenie was browsing through the menu, Nigel came closer to her and read the menu with her. Queenie couldn't help but exclaim, "This is so expensive. Let's order one to taste it." Nigel said immediately. "It's all right. I want to eat." Then, Nigel turned toward the waiter and said, "Add this too." Queenie pursed her red lips to suppress the happiness inside. The feeling of being pampered was wonderful. Bonnie was also ordering the food, but she couldn't pay attention. She was jealous, feeling the fondness of Nigel for Queenie. In the past, that was how Leslie used to treat Bonnie. However, afterward, Leslie moved back to Queenie, so Bonnie became single. She couldn't understand why Nigel treated them differently, even if the both of them looked similar. May I know where the washroom is? Maggie asked the waiter. Queenie also happened to need to make the trip and said, Mom, I'll go with you. A gleam of scheme flashed under Bonnie's eyes as she watched Queenie and Maggie leave. Then, she immediately got up and went to Nigel as she leaned down to approach him. Nigel, have you tasted this dish before? Is it good? Can we have one? She pointed to a dish and asked Nigel as she deliberately showed an innocent look. However, Nigel only felt the smell of Bonnie's perfume makes him suffocate, so his upper body tried to keep the distance between them as far as possible. Feel free to order whatever you want. Nigel didn't want to discuss the dishes with her. Really? That's so nice of you. Bonnie flashed her smile, and her heavy makeup was visible under the light. The lipstick made Nigel not want to look at her more than once, as her face was filled with rich metallic colors, which made her look fake. Bonnie deliberately stood by Nigel's side, pretending to be looking at the menu. She wanted to wait for Queenie to come back and see her standing there. Sure enough, when Queenie walked into the room and saw Bonnie standing beside Nigel, she was annoyed. Queenie, Nigel is so kind. He lets me order whatever I want, Bonnie said with a smile toward Queenie, as if she was praising Queenie's good taste. In reality, she was trying to show off how well Nigel treated her. However, when Queenie sat back down, he took the initiative to lean closer and stared straight at her with alluring eyes until her displeasure disappeared. Instead, she was getting embarrassed to be stared at by him. So, she reached out to block his eyes to signal him not to look. However, Nigel quietly held her hand and placed it under the table to grip it firmly. Bonnie stood close to them, so she directly witnessed the show of affection. Hence, she couldn't help but feel her heart clogged up and returned to her seat. Then, she saw Queenie holding up a cup and stared at her warningly. In response, Bonnie deliberately lowered her head to pretend not to notice. It was then that the food came. They opened up 2 bottles of wine that cost $400,000, and Brandon drank happily. He was happy with his future son-in-law. Queenie had been blushing, and she had the feeling that her parents could not wait for her to marry tomorrow. Bonnie's gaze was full of jealousy and hatred. Bonnie regretted that she had stolen Leslie from Queenie. If she hadn't stolen him from Queenie, Queenie would have married him by now, so she wouldn't be lucky enough to meet Nigel. However, there was no second chance, so Bonnie could only look for future opportunities. Mom, I want to go shopping after lunch. Bonnie felt she lacked attraction because her clothes were not of high quality. As such, she wanted to buy a few sets of the latest fashion to complement her style. Unlike Queenie, who grew up rich with confidence naturally emanating from her heart, Bonnie lacked that. Bonnie was like a girl that grew up in a low-income family. In the face of the money in the upper class, she was like a greedy minion who couldn't wait to hold everything tightly in her hands. Queenie had been enjoying the rich girl treatment for her whole life, which resulted in her not prioritizing material comforts. Instead, her mannerisms showed a hint of elegance and confidence. All right. Do you need me to accompany you? Maggie asked. There's no need. I'm going alone. Bonnie wouldn't want her mother to see her splurging. After lunch, the group gathered at the entrance of the restaurant. Queenie didn't feel like going home at the moment, but she felt bad to leave her parents and go with Nigel. An idea occurred to her soon after. Did I leave my purse at your house? She asked with feigned confusion. Nigel got the hint as soon as he met her eyes, and he answered flawlessly, It looks like you left it in the first-floor lobby. Do you want to get it with me? Sure. Dad, Mom, I'll go to retrieve my purse at his place. Once she finished her words, she grabbed his hand and hurriedly left the restaurant. Little did she know, her parents were sharing a knowing look on their faces, but they did nothing to stop her. Instead, they turned to each other and laughed at the situation. Bonnie seized the opportunity by remarking on the situation on purpose. It seems like Queenie is expecting to marry him very soon. He's a man with good qualities. I want to see her marry him as fast as possible, maybe even more than herself. Maggie smiled knowingly. Bonnie choked at her words. She was planning to accuse Queenie of a lack of consideration for their parents in the first place. However, their parents were satisfied with Nigel to such a degree that they wanted to see Queenie marry him. Mom, I'm going to the mall now. Be safe. After the reminder, Bonnie headed toward a cab. At the same moment, Queenie already found herself in Nigel's car as she patted her chest in relief. My parents can't tell I lied to them, right? Nigel fought back a smile and comforted her with all seriousness. They probably can't. That's good. She sighed in relief and beamed at him. It seems like I can expect a free dinner from you. Her adorable behavior melted his heart. Besides, he found that having somebody to depend on him was something that made him happy. Reaching out a hand, he caressed the back of her head. We're heading to the hotel and having dinner over there. All right. Queenie nodded obediently. Meanwhile, Bonnie went to the shopping mall alone for a shopping spree. She had decided to spend a lot on high fashion without monitoring her spending. She found a piece of garment she was interested in, but its price was too expensive for her standards. Thus, she was hesitating the whole time. At that moment, a woman behind her shrieked in surprise, "What a coincidence!" Turning to the woman who called out to her, Bonnie was surprised to find she had no idea who the woman was. Frowning, she asked, "Do I know you? Don't you remember me? I'm Lena Perez. We met in the hotel last night." Lena was sizing Bonnie up when she answered the other woman. She couldn't help but sneer quietly. She looked pure and innocent under the night light last night, so what's the matter with the heavy makeup on her face right now? Where did the innocence go? Lena might be envious of Queenie's beauty last night, but now she had second thoughts after meeting Queenie in the mall. Nigel has bad taste in women. How could he fall for a woman who did plastic surgery in the first place? The realization immediately dawned on Bonnie. The girl before her had mistaken her for Queenie. Judging by the look of the other girl, it was obvious that she wasn't Queenie's friend, and was more like a rival to Queenie. Bonnie cast her a smile. "Miss, you've got the wrong person. Queenie is my older sister, and I'm Bonnie." "She has a twin sister? I had no idea." Lena couldn't contain her surprise. It's a surprise to see Queenie has a younger sister who looks similar to her. "That's right. However, I went missing as a child and only returned to my family a year ago, which is the reason you don't know anything about it." After explaining to the other woman, Bonnie began to observe Lena from head to toe as she twirled her hair. "Queenie is dating Nigel at the moment. Are you aware of it?" Lena shot her another question. "Of course. We had lunch together a while ago. However, I feel like Queenie isn't good enough for him in all aspects. Rather, a girl from a noble family like you suits him the most." Bonnie cast Lena a look of admiration when she said that. Lena's eyes shone in excitement as she grasped the key information. Bonnie went missing during her youth and only returned to the Silverstein family recently. She must resent her sister, who grew up getting pampered by the family. Furthermore, Bonnie's words had an undertone that implied her hatred toward Queenie. "You're Bonnie, right? Are you interested in this piece of garment? Don't worry. I'm a premium VIP here, so I can ask the store manager to give you 70% off for it." Bonnie was ablaze with bliss at Lena's words. 70% off? Wonderful. Are you sure? "Miss Perez, thank you so much. It's not a big deal. You can treat it as my way to make a new friend." Lena looked straight at Bonnie when she answered. Bonnie immediately understood Lena's motive. They both hated the same person. Besides, Bonnie could set Queenie up and prevent her from marrying into the Manson family with Lena's assistance. At the same time, Lena was thinking about using Bonnie's help to separate Nigel and Queenie with more ease. I'm glad to hear that. Miss Perez, let's exchange numbers. We can hang out for coffee sometimes. Bonnie answered in enthusiasm. After the two exchanged numbers, Lena used her membership card to claim the highest discount for the shirt, and Bonnie was happy with her gesture. She was looking forward to seeing Lena become Queenie's rival. Queenie stayed at the hotel until she had dinner with Nigel before she headed home. It was already 9:00 p.m. when she arrived home. "Mom, I'm back." She greeted her mother, who was watching television on the couch. "Welcome home. Come here. I've got something to ask you." Maggie gestured for her to come over. Queenie obeyed and took a seat next to her mother anxiously. "What is it, Mom?" "I have a question. Does Nigel's family know the two of you are seeing each other?" Maggie asked with a serious expression. Lowering her gaze due to shyness, Queenie shook her head. "It hasn't been long since we dated. I haven't seen his parents for the time being. Does he plan to introduce you to his parents?" Maggie pressed. Queenie pondered for a moment before she shook her head again. "We're not quite there yet, Mom. We're taking things slowly at the moment." Maggie was disappointed to hear such words from Queenie. She had seen a lot of rich kids being irresponsible in their relationship matters. They only sought pleasure for the moment and would dump the woman after that. Thus, Maggie didn't want to see her daughter end up being heartbroken after spending most of her youth on the man she loved. "Mom, don't worry about me. Nigel likes me, and I like him too. We had thought about it seriously when we started to date each other." Queenie comforted her mother. "You should handle your relationship with a man wisely. I'm merely giving you suggestions based on my experience. Your father and I both think Nigel is a good man. However, his family is more complicated than we can ever imagine. Our family isn't as strong as his, understand?" Queenie was well aware of the differences between both families. As such, she nodded and assured her mother, "All right. I'll be careful." Somewhere near the stair rails of the second level was Bonnie, who stood there like a specter and eavesdropped on the conversation downstairs. A sneer formed at the corner of her lips when she learned that Queenie hadn't met Nigel's parents. Is Nigel too ashamed to introduce Queenie to his parents because she's good for nothing? Does it mean he only plans to play with her feelings? The corner of her lips curled into a satisfied smile. Since Bonnie now had Lena's number, they would work together to separate Queenie and Nigel when the timing was right. When Queenie went upstairs with her purse in tow, she bumped into Bonnie at the end of the staircase, and the other woman was blocking her way. "Get out of my way." Queenie didn't bother to hide the impatience in her voice. "Queenie, are you still mad at me? What can I do to earn your forgiveness?" Bonnie feigned sadness in her tone, but her hands were still stretching out, blocking Queenie from crossing. "Can't you hear I'm asking you to make way for me?" Queenie couldn't hold back her frustration. "Queenie, I'm sorry. Please don't be mad at me. I promise there won't be a next time." Bonnie raised her voice on purpose, and her words reached Maggie downstairs as expected. At that, Maggie shouted at her older daughter from the couch, "Queenie, Bonnie has learned her mistakes. Stop blaming her." Queenie was gritting her teeth at her mother for siding with Bonnie. On the contrary, Bonnie had a wide smile that stretched across her face, and her tone was humble as she said, "Queenie, I've learned from my mistakes. Will you please forgive me? I promise I'll listen to you in the future." Queenie was disgusted by Bonnie's two-faced behavior and she felt nauseated at it. However, she was feeling sad and despair deep down inside. Having a younger sister like Bonnie, who was manipulative, would only endanger the whole family one day. "Do you even have a conscience?" Drop the act," Queenie warned the other woman in a low voice. However, Bonnie answered her with a whisper too. "Queenie, I won't deny it. I like to see the look on your face when you have to constantly tolerate my presence instead of chasing me away. It's fun to watch." The blood drained from Queenie's face due to her fury as she wondered what she had done to Bonnie and got on the other woman's bad side. "Queenie, maybe we can still be sisters if you're willing to let me have young Master Nigel. If so, I promise to not upset you anymore," Bonnie whispered again. At that, Queenie spoke through gritted teeth. "Don't even think about it. You're petty. Didn't you say you'll give me everything I want?" Bonnie pouted, but her gaze suggested a hint of viciousness. Queenie trembled uncontrollably as her anger had reached its peak. She had enough of her shameless sister. "Bonnie, will you ever stop?" Getting the reaction she was expecting, Bonnie went downstairs with a satisfied smile on her face while Queenie returned to her room and suppressed the boiling anger within her. Sooner or later, Bonnie will be the end of us. Once Bonnie got downstairs, she crossed paths with Brandon, who just got home a moment ago. His presence reminded her of the banquet on Friday, which she was looking forward to. She was determined to attend the banquet by herself without Queenie's company. Holding his arm, she acted coquettishly as she asked, "Dad, can you attend the banquet tomorrow with me only?" "What's wrong? Why are we not bringing your sister along?" "Since she already has young Master Nigel, I want to seize the opportunity to find a man as good as him at the banquet." Bonnie feigned self-loathing as she mumbled, "I've never been as confident as her since I was young. People will never notice me if she's presented at the banquet." Brandon agreed with her opinion. Growing up with her foster parents, Bonnie turned into a childish and petty woman, which was the opposite of Queenie, who was confident and cheerful. He nodded. "All right, I'll bring you along." "Thanks, Dad." Bonnie beamed a smile at her father. Meanwhile, in Queenie's room on the third level, her ringing phone grabbed her attention as soon as she finished a shower. Casting a glance at the caller ID, she answered the call with a sweet tone. "Hello, are you home already?" "I just got home." "Are you free tomorrow night?" "I am. I need your company at a banquet." Queenie was looking forward to it and she quickly agreed. "All right." They chatted for a moment before she felt a little drowsy. Slumping on the bed, she announced, "I'm sleepy. See you tomorrow." "Good night." "Good night to you too." Queenie found herself in a comfortable sleeping position before she shut her eyes and fell into slumber. After Bonnie returned to her room, she began to check her phone gallery for a picture of her. She swiped through most of them idly until she stopped at the ones with her and Leslie in some suggesting positions. At that time, he refused to show cooperation when she took them. Therefore, he had his hands covering his head and didn't reveal his face in most of the pictures. Her skin without makeup seemed smooth and silky, while her red lips looked puffy with the help of a beautifying filter. Bonnie herself had a normal skin type, and she was envious of Queenie's ivory and soft skin, and she couldn't even see the pores on her face. She was focusing on her face in the picture. It's hard to tell whether the woman in the pictures is me or Queenie. Who knew I had a good weapon in my phone? Bonnie zoomed in on the photo to see the details with a proud look on her face. She shared many similar features of Queenie's face. An associate might be able to distinguish them, but a stranger would no doubt mistake her for Queenie. A malicious idea popped into her mind. Queenie can only dream of marrying Nigel if his parents see the pictures. Even though he believes Queenie's innocence in the first place, his parents might have a different opinion. Judging by their picky standards, it's not that easy to get their approval. Bonnie decided to save the pictures in a safer platform for her plan. She was going to attend an important banquet that involved many business elites with her father tomorrow. She took note of finding a man of Nigel's social status during the banquet. After all, Nigel was a clever man. She found that he was more than he showed and a bit of evil in their previous confrontations. He had seen through all of her previous attempts. It was impossible for him to fall in love with her now. Hence, she was determined to dress attractively for the banquet in order to take full advantage of such an opportunity. Brandon left for work after their breakfast. Bonnie would be attending the banquet with him at 4:00 p.m. later. For Bonnie's sake, he decided to keep the banquet a secret from Queenie, as he knew Queenie would definitely attend if she knew about it. Everyone could see that Brandon and Maggie were both biased toward Bonnie. The duo felt sorry for Bonnie, who had a difficult time growing up, and so they showered her with as much love as they could now. Meanwhile, after lunch, Queenie received a call from Nigel, who asked her to go to a high-end store for evening gowns. When she arrived, she was treated as a distinguished guest of the shop, and she was even served a sumptuous set of afternoon tea. Queenie did not inform her parents of this. She simply informed her mother that she would be returning home late tonight. In the high-end store, she was treated like an honored guest. As the time was still early, she enjoyed a spa and afternoon tea in the shop's private restaurant while preparing for the dinner banquet tonight. She exuded a natural elegance and confidence. After enjoying everything served, at 4:30 p.m., she began meticulously selecting a gown that would suit her. At the same time, Bonnie was also preparing for the dinner banquet in another store. She had spoken with Lena earlier in the day and knew the other woman would be attending the banquet as well. With that, they both agreed to meet at the banquet. Bonnie was in a good mood, knowing that she could fully enjoy tonight's banquet without Queenie stealing the show. Brandon had also given her enough money so that she could dress up well. Time flew by as both Queenie and Bonnie did the same thing at different evening gown stores, trying on gowns and applying makeup. Queenie chose a one-of-a-kind rose-themed gown from the store. It was elegant and romantic. She looked like a fairy with it on, and she was absolutely stunning. Her makeup was light and simple, with a pink undertone. Her complexion and facial features were naturally lovely, and the light makeup accentuated them perfectly. Her style that night was completely appropriate for her age. The rhinestones on her gown, as well as the textured tulle beneath it, enhanced her youthful vigor and beauty to the fullest. She looked like a princess who had just emerged from her palace. "You're so beautiful, Miss Silverstein," the store manager couldn't help but exclaim from the bottom of his heart. He hadn't seen a lady with such an elegant, pure, and innocent aura in a long time. "Thank you," Queenie replied with a shy smile. Someone came up the stairs at this precise moment. Queenie turned around to see Nigel coming up the stairs, one of his hands tucked into this pocket. He was dressed in a dark-colored shirt and slim-fit trousers. His straight brows, rounded eyes, and sharp facial contours all exuded a wild and unruly aura. "Look, young Master Nigel. Miss Silverstein is so beautiful, isn't she?" the manager quickly asked. Nigel's gaze was already fixed on Queenie. Her dressing up in such a way had truly astounded him. "Yes, she is stunning," he praised. Queenie loved the gown she was wearing, and she was looking forward to attending tonight's dinner banquet with Nigel. Meanwhile, Bonnie chose a gown that she thought was the best she could find. She purposefully chose a bright red feminine gown that revealed a little of her bosom to attract attention. She was completely confident in her body shape, particularly her upper body. She stood in front of the mirror, admiring herself, and was pleased with her own decisions. She reasoned that she would definitely stand out from the crowd tonight. She was also pleased that Queenie would not be able to attend such a grand dinner banquet. Not long after, Brandon's driver picked her up from the store and drove her to the hotel where the banquet was being held. The host for tonight happened to be the Royal Hotel, a hotel owned by the Manson Group. Hope arose in Bonnie's heart. Will I run into Nigel here tonight? What if he shows up later at the banquet? I have to attract his attention. Excitement flashed across her eyes as she was immersed in her thoughts. Brandon arrived at the venue after a short while. When he saw Bonnie's outfit, he furrowed his eyebrows and queried, "Bonnie, don't you think you should wear a coat over your gown? It does not appear appropriate." Bonnie blinked as she commented, "Dad, this is the current fashion. It's not very revealing." "All right, then." Brandon still thought the gown was inappropriate, but he couldn't do anything about it. When he brought Bonnie into the hall, he noticed some other ladies wearing the same type of gown. With that, he finally agreed with her decision. After all, his biggest wish was for Bonnie to find someone she loved at the dinner banquet tonight. As the banquet began, more and more guests arrived. Bonnie awkwardly followed Brandon around for a while because it was her first time attending such a grand event after returning to the Silverstein family. Suddenly, a lady's voice called out to her. "You're here, Bonnie." "Hello, Miss Perez," Bonnie said enthusiastically as she approached Lena. Lena had also put effort into her appearance today. She was a few years older than Bonnie and had a more mature and feminine style. "Why are you here alone? Is your sister not coming?" Lena curiously asked. "Her schedule is packed, so I'm the only one attending with my father. Since young Master Nigel will be here tonight, I assumed your sister would as well." "What? Young Master Nigel will be here?" "Yes. I looked through the guest list and saw his name. Furthermore, tonight's banquet is being held at his hotel. He would, at the very least, appear to greet the guests," Lena responded, her face flushed with anticipation. When Bonnie heard that, a thought flashed through her mind. "Nigel is coming, so I'll have a chance to impress him tonight. Lena is also a very pretty lady, but I have the advantage of being younger. Furthermore, I resemble Queenie. Nigel may develop feelings for me as a result of this." At this moment, Nigel's sports car slotted itself in the hotel's designated parking spot. This was a spot specifically reserved for him. As the Manson family's young master, he was given preferential treatment in all Manson Group's assets. Queenie emerged from the sports car not long after. Nigel felt unwilling to have to bring her to the dinner after looking at her, with the bright, silver light of the chandelier shining on her face. He wished to take her home right away so that he could admire her beauty alone. "Let's go. Are we running late?" Queenie asked, as they had even gone for their dinner earlier. In response, Nigel simply walked over to her and took her hand in his, saying, "It's fine to be late." Queenie then took his arm as the both of them walked into the hall. When they both stepped in, the usher was stunned. "Oh my! That's young Master Nigel, but who's the lady next to him? She's absolutely gorgeous and looks just like a goddess." Under the scrutiny of the entire crew in the hall, Queenie strolled in shyly. She was well aware that Nigel was the dream lover of every unmarried woman employee in the hotel. That was why when she walked in with Nigel, they all looked at her with shock. They were all envious of her. In the hall, all of Averna's reputable figures and wealthy businessmen were there. Bonnie had left her father and began walking around with Lena. While they were going around socializing, Lena told Bonnie about all the wealthy young masters from various reputable families. As Bonnie did not know much about the upper class of the society in Averna, she learned a lot from Lena just by walking around with her. Looking at all the wealthy men, Bonnie was more interested in their wealth than in their appearances. They were all either unkempt or plump, and none of them seemed to care about their appearances. They were completely incomparable to Nigel. Lena, too, was uninterested in these men. The only person she desired to be with was Nigel. With that, she could become the lady boss of thousands of hotels and travel the world for the rest of her life. Such a life was exactly what she dreamt of. However, she was concerned, as Nigel was nowhere to be seen even after the banquet had begun for a while. Why hasn't he arrived yet? Is he not coming tonight? Just as she was troubled over Nigel's absence, her gaze, which was fixed on the door, brightened up. But it was only for a few seconds before it dimmed again. Nigel was here, but he was accompanied by a lady who was holding his arm. "Isn't that Bonnie's twin sister, Queenie? It's such a surprise that she is here with Nigel. Wait a minute. Her gown looks familiar. It is the latest design in the fashion industry, with only one piece in the entire country, and now, Queenie is wearing it." Queenie quickly became the person in the hall who everyone envied the most. Every woman in the hall tonight worked in the fashion industry and was up to date on the latest trends. Hence, they were well aware of how special the gown Queenie was wearing was. It was the top-tier gown of the Rose series, launched last spring by Blair, the world-renowned designer. Seeing the gown in the hall, one of the women couldn't help but exclaim, "Who is that lady? How did she get the gown? Isn't the answer obvious given who she's holding? That's Nigel, the Manson family's young master. Of course she gets to have any gown she desires." Meanwhile, Bonnie was making her way back to the hall after leaving the ladies. She gently patted away the few water droplets on her chest, fearing that her gown would become soiled. She, however, sensed a bright light emanating from the crowd in the hall, and the rose on that shining gown appeared extremely elegant and mysterious in the light. With the diamond detailing, it looked exactly like the first rose that bloomed in the morning mist. Just as she was astonished by the gown, she saw the woman wearing it takes a glass of red wine from the waiter. That stunning look from the side completely took Bonnie aback. Why is Queenie here? How is this possible? Queenie appeared to be a noble princess, drawing everyone's attention. Bonnie's heart swelled with jealousy when she saw how charming Queenie was. Then Bonnie noticed Nigel, who was busy greeting the guests, standing next to Queenie, and she realized that Queenie was Nigel's companion for the banquet tonight. Bonnie expected Queenie to be unable to attend without Brandon's invitation, but to her surprise, Queenie arrived with Nigel. Bonnie then lowered her head to look at her red gown, which now appeared uncouth in comparison to Queenie's gown. Realizing this, she frustratingly lowered her hand that had been patting off the water droplets on her chest earlier. Then, she looked at Lena, who was talking with her friends in a hushed tone while looking in Queenie's direction every now and then. She is obviously irritated as well. After taking a deep breath, Bonnie walked toward Queenie. "You're here too, Queenie," Bonnie called out. Queenie thought that she was hallucinating when she heard Bonnie's voice. At that, she quickly turned around and saw the person approaching her was indeed Bonnie. "Why are you here?" Queenie asked in surprise. Bonnie let out a broad smile in response. "Dad brought me here to have a look." She was, in fact, flaunting the fact that Brandon had only brought her here. That worked on Queenie. Dad brought just her alone? Don't blame Dad, Queenie. I'm not like you, who has attended grand events since you were a child, so Dad brought me here, Bonnie continued with the smile still on her face. Hearing that, Queenie raised her head to look for Brandon, whom she found among a group of businessmen. "I'll go greet Dad," she told Bonnie. Then, she walked toward Brandon's direction. Brandon was both surprised and happy to see Queenie appear in such a gorgeous manner, and he said, "How did you get here, Queenie?" "I came with Nigel, Dad," Queenie responded smilingly. "Wow. Is this your eldest daughter, Mr. Silverstein? You are truly blessed to have such a lovely daughter." "That's right. She is not only beautiful but also graceful and elegant." Everyone was full of praises for Queenie. Indeed, she deserved such compliments as well, as she truly looked stunning in the spotlight. But Bonnie, who was planning to approach them, was displeased. She realized she shouldn't go to them right now because she would look like an accessory who was only there to compliment Queenie. Just as she was about to turn around and leave, Brandon noticed her and called out to her. "Bonnie, come over here." With that, Bonnie had no choice but to follow his words. "This is my younger daughter, Bonnie." Everyone turned to look at Bonnie immediately after that. They were all surprised by how different Bonnie and Queenie looked, and even doubted whether they were twins. Bonnie, on the other hand, seemed to sense their doubts and felt helpless. Her face flushed with embarrassment.
Thank you for listening. If you have enjoyed this story, please like and share so others can see it too. Also hit the subscription button and notification bell so you can be notified on our next release. Thank you for your support. God bless you.